to WION Business Masters, a brand new business talk show where we bring forth the stories of business leaders and perhaps how they have placed India at the top of the world business ranks. And joining us today is a man who has created the Google of all travel. He is the group CEO of an online travel agency which provides the tools you need to make informed decisions and enjoy a seamless travel experience. Ixigo. I'm sure you must have used Ixigo for traveling around the world. Having said that, it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Aloke Bajpai to WION Business Masters. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Mr. Bajpai.
Thank you for having me on the program.
Now, Mr. Bajpai, you have been in the ecosystem for the past 15 to 16 years. Talk to us about how has the journey been like. Your company is one of the most enduring companies in India today.
Thank you. We've actually been around for about 17 years now. We launched in 2007. And just going back to our genesis, we started out in a market where there were just 12, 13 million internet users. And we were trying to solve problems faced by Indians when it comes to, everything from planning to booking to managing their trips. And back then, that problem used to be finding where the cheapest flight ticket is, because the only people who were online were people who could book flights. But over time, as the middle class came online, as internet penetrated tier 2, 3 towns, we discovered that there was a large market around trains, buses, and domestic travel, which could be unlocked. And we actually went out there and unlocked that over the last decade. So we've actually built this company over the last 17 years.
Mr. Bajpai, we have to talk about the journey of your company. Your company made a debut on Dalal Street with remarkable performance, underscoring your journey from humble beginnings. And when I say that, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about here. You started your journey from a modest one room, and now you're one of the leading companies in India. How has that been like?
Yeah, I mean, everyone starts small, so I guess that was the same for us. So back in 2006-07, when we came back from Europe, so actually me and my co-founder, we both used to work in Europe. Prior to that, we were classmates from IIT. And one of the things that drove me back, obviously, was the booming economy here, and travel was starting to take off with low-cost carriers like Air Deccan and others that came around back then. And of course, internet had started to penetrate as well. But the trigger point for me personally was, a movie. Actually, I watched Swades back in 2005, and that was the light your bulb moment for me, which actually made me want to come back and do something for the country.
I was just coming to that you spent around 4 years working in Europe, and you felt underutilized, and you felt like you had to come back and do something for the country. But back then, startups were not a big thing when you started to launch a company like Ixigo back then. What were some of the major challenges that you faced, and what were some of your governing principles that helped you sway through this journey?
Yeah, so when we actually decided to come back, honestly, we had not really, got a lot of capital with us. I mean, we maybe got some modest savings, but then we had some loans to take care of as well. I just finished business school, so I had my B school loan to pay off. My co-founder had his own financial liability. So when we started the company, actually, it was started with very little capital in a small apartment in Gurgaon, like you said. And I think in that moment of time, the venture capital ecosystem or the angel investor ecosystem wasn't really well formed. So they were, you could count investors on your fingers, literally, on people who invested in startups, and there were very few startups indeed. But I think we were very passionate about solving problems for Indian travelers, because see, travel is it's actually an experiential space, right? It's not just about selling a ticket. It actually is about caring for everything that happens before, during, and after the trip, right? Right from the time when you start thinking about making a plan to when you're actually doing your research and figuring out where to book and what to book. And then when you're in that moment, when you're traveling, there are moments of anxiety. So we thought that we should take care of all of these. So the genesis was around creating a better customer experience for Indian travelers and for every Indian, not just for the top 50 million Indians who can afford to fly, but for every Indian out there, can we actually solve for making travel simpler for them, give information at their fingertips, and create a customer experience which makes them feel cared for throughout the journey.
I was actually just coming to that, Mr. Bajpai, that you've always emphasized, rather your company Ixigo has always emphasized on value more than monetary gains. Is that one of your core principles and the reason why you're so successful today?
See, one of our core values historically has always been empathy. So when we started the company, we went through the global financial crisis within a year of starting out, right? 2008, you had GFC, funding dried up. Our team actually stuck together and went through a lot of pain, but we all took that together and built the company despite everything that was happening out there. In fact, I still remember, like, most employees took voluntary salary cuts of almost half of their salary, and we made it on the other side. Those people got ESOPs and they were able to monetize it later. But essentially, this happened again during COVID, right, where we've seen most companies actually laying off employees in our space, but we managed to keep everyone together and work for our customers day and night to make the refunds happen and make sure we delivered the best customer experience. So one of the core tenets for us has been, can we build enough empathy to create the best customer experience in this space, right? And that continues to remain our vision in everything we do. Like, we always chase customer experience first. If we actually deliver a great customer experience, we've seen that customers will go out there and tell others about our apps and services. And over time, you can monetize. You can build out transactions later and monetize. This is what we did in flights, in trains, and buses. In every vertical that we entered, we first solved for building the best product and customer experience. And then a few years later, we were able to start monetizing that and build a large business around it.
Absolutely. So Ixigo has clearly gone through various waves, from the financial crisis to the COVID-19 pandemic. Talk to us more about what do you do to stay relevant in today's sector, considering how there are so many other counterparts that have also emerged apart from Ixigo.
Yeah, so one thing we do at Ixigo which makes us unique is that when we imagine what products we need to create, we do not get biased by what's already out there. If you take an example of the train app that we built, right, back in 2013, we wanted to create a utility app that solves all train-related pain areas, whether it was telling people whether the train was running on time or not, using crowdsourced information from our other travelers, or giving them accurate predictions about whether their waitlisted PNR would actually confirm or not, or telling them where their coach will be, where their platform will be, where their seat will be on the train. And these are things that we actually aggregated from other travelers and made it available to our users. Now, this problem existed since ages, but we used data and technology to solve these problems and made it more accessible for everyone to do it in 8 languages across India in a very lightweight app. So I think the way we innovate is by not following anybody's playbook, but by creating our own playbooks, by deeply observing the customers and identifying the pain areas of the customers and solving them, irrespective of whether we'll monetize them today or not. And I think that's key, because most innovation on day one looks like a low ROI problem to solve on day one, and therefore many companies do not go down that path.
Just to follow up on that, how do you envision Ixigo's role in the global travel industry now, and what is your vision for the company for the next perhaps 5 to 10 years?
So if you look at our scale, right, we've actually touched a lot of lives in India. Last year, we did 480 million annual active users. Currently, we do close to 80 million monthly active users across India. One reason behind that is that we've gone very deep on tier 2, 3, 4 cities, right? The smallest of towns in India. We have tons of users from them, and 94% of our transactions actually happen with one leg in a tier 2, 3, 4 town. So in that sense, we are very spread out across India. We've managed to create a very large presence in smaller towns like Lucknow, Indore, Bhopal, or Kochi, etc. And what we've seen is that over time, that has helped us grow much faster, because if you look at where the new airports are coming in, right, if you look at where the new road infrastructure is getting created, it's largely to connect the tier 2, 3, 4 cities in India, right, where the government has allocated enough capital expenditure to see that growth through. And therefore, you see us growing faster than the overall market. Like last quarter, even on the flights business, we've grown almost 28% in gross transaction value terms year on year, in a market where the aviation itself was growing at around 5%, right? So I think we've managed to do that because of our deep penetration in smaller towns.
Let's just go a few years back before you launched your company. You worked in a European company for 4 to 5 years. That's what even you mentioned here. In what way did that help you perhaps in your career moving forward? Were there some teachings or lessons that you learned and perhaps implemented coming back to India?
Yeah, so I worked for Amadeus in Europe, in the south of France, for almost 4.5 years. And then I went to business school, which was also in France as well as in Singapore. I think, see, two things. One is, yes, of course, I learned the ropes of the travel industry and travel tech there to some extent, because I was part of the evolution from the green screen terminals where people used to book travel to the browser-based system that's become prevalent today. So got fortunate to be involved in that transition. But secondly, most importantly, I think, look, all the action, all the excitement today is in India, right? We are going to be the third largest domestic travel market in the world by 2027. Right. We are going to be the fifth largest international travel market by 2027. This is from a recent Bernstein report. And, you know, if you look at the power of an Indian traveler when it comes to purchasing power today versus what it was 10 years ago, countries are welcoming Indians as, you know, inbound tourists and making the visa process simpler. And we are seeing this in our business. So our international business grew 71% year on year. Large part of that driven by tier 2 towns again. So people from Lucknow, Kochi, going to Vietnam, Singapore, Baku, you know, and this trend is what will create the next champions in global online travel, because Indians are going to be one of the most important tourist cohorts for any country in the world.
So you've clearly chosen a very unconventional path way back when people preferred 9 to 5 jobs, and you've clearly also said that you're not somebody who fits into the box. You think out of the box. But do you think the fact that you also passed out of IIT perhaps helped you vision a company like Ixigo and also take steps forward in accomplishing that?
Well, definitely the IIT education sort of prepares you for a lot of grit and resilience, given the amount of academics you need to balance, even if your interests lie outside of that at times. But I think it did set a very good base for me in terms of learning, and that's where I was first exposed to computers. That's where my love for the internet evolved. We were the first batch at IIT that got access to email and internet, and you know, that really helped to explore the world. But more important than that, I think it's really the resilience that our team has shown over time, right? And I think many businesses have been started, but then you know, when you go through tough time is when a true test of a business actually comes out. And we've seen enough tough times where we were able to keep together and not really, you know, not really go down a path where we start cutting back, but actually become more aggressive. So during both crises that I talked about, we doubled down. We actually went on offense as opposed to defense. And we said, look, the only way to get out of a crisis is to create your own new path. And in the last crisis, we actually transitioned ourselves totally from a meta search and utility platform to an OTA platform and became the second largest OTA by revenue in the country. And that wouldn't have been possible if we actually decided to just sit and wait for the crisis to get over, right? So I think that's the resilience, the grit that we showed during these tough times.
What are the other aspects that inspired you to come back to India and take that leap of faith when you were working in Europe compared to your journey from scratch in India?
Well, actually, when I was in business school, I sat through a few of the interview rounds with some major consulting firms and, you know, just the traditional path of post-MBA life. And the feedback I got from some of them was that I couldn't think straight. And then I started to do research about what do people who can't think straight usually do. And I saw that maybe entrepreneurship is something that could be, you know, an area where I could excel at. And that, you know, that sort of prodded me along. And of course, Swades was a huge trigger point. There's this particular scene in the movie where, you know, this boy is selling water for 25 paise a glass. And I think I've watched that scene like a zillion times. And it just triggered something inside me saying, you got to go back and do something that changes the status quo for travel in India. And I think that was the moment when I called up my co-founder and said, it's time to go back, right? And that's the moment when we decided to come back to India and start building Ixigo.
And it has been quite a success. What are some of your personal leadership qualities that somehow reflects in your company today?
So I think we've managed to build the right culture, and it's been a painful way to build it, but essentially we've gone through a lot of crisis. Where we've managed to keep the team together and managed to do the right things for the customer. You see, the true test of all these posters companies put on their walls saying this is what our culture is all about and we're customer obsessed and we put customers first. The true test comes in moments where, doing the right thing comes at a price, right? And I'll tell you, in the middle of COVID, right, when the lockdowns were announced, the first reaction for most travel companies was to hold back on refunds. And we actually refunded customers from our own pockets and did not wait for airlines or suppliers to give us back the money, because we said in this moment of crisis, if we keep money back from our customers who might need it because they might be suffering a health crisis at this moment, we don't know, it would be unethical to do that. And we actually were one of the first to actually start clearing all COVID refunds ahead of even getting back the money from supply. There was one particular day where we had to crowd fund money into our payment gateway account from our own employees and refund it to our customers because we didn't want them to wait another 2 days. And I think it's those moments that define how customer experience focused or customer obsessed you are as a company. Right. So I think we've lived up to what we say our values are, which is being extremely customer experience focused, being empathetic. And I think that's what has brought us here, and that's what will get us to the next level as well.
You've spoken about how you faced rejections during the start of your journey, of your career, and you've clearly come a long way now. What are you most proud of?
Well, when it comes to rejections, I've faced quite a few. I can tell you that in the first decade of my journey, I would have knocked almost every door out there, every venture capitalist, every investor. And I mean, the only ones that opened were the ones who are on my cap table, right? So in that sense, I think I've faced quite a few rejections in my early years, and it was very tough. There were moments where, and I can recall one particular incident in Bangalore. There's this VC who tells me that the idea is not even worth raising $100,000.
Because I read about that.
And that night I couldn't sleep, right? Because you're putting your heart and soul into building something, and someone else tells you that it's not worth anything, almost, right? It's very hard, and I lost a lot of sleep that night. But then the next day morning, I just woke up with the fervor of trying to prove her wrong, right? And I said, look, it doesn't matter what the world thinks. As long as my customers are happy with what I'm building, I should keep building it, right? And we went back to the drawing board and kept doing what we needed to do to survive and grow, right? So it's important in those moments to go back to the first principle thinking of saying, are we doing something that's fundamentally helping our customers out? Are they loving it? And if they are, then find every way to survive and make it work, because at some point, those businesses will monetize and grow, which is our story is a prime example of that.
Correct. I mean, a lot of resilience that you have shown, and so has your company. But what is the thought process that keeps you going and never lets you give up?
I think it's the passion for doing something meaningful for our country's citizens or people, right? And for me, the fact that travel is the only thing, probably maybe books is the other, but travel is one of the things we spend on, which makes us richer, right? If you think about it, you're spending money on travel and you're building connections, you're coming closer with your family or friends, whoever you're traveling with, and you're building connections with the local populace, right? You're learning culture, history about a place. Right. I think it's very fulfilling that every day we are enabling hundreds of thousands of travelers to gain that experience. Millions of travelers every month who use our app are able to build that kind of experience and rich sort of experiential outcomes that we are creating. So I think that's very, 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 very fulfilling, and that's what keeps us awake.
Right, Mr. Bajpai, keeping all the business and the journey talks aside, let's get to know you more.
Sure.
When you're not working, what do you do? Do you catch a flight to your favorite destination or do you prefer to stay at home?
So when I'm not working, which is very little time, but when I'm not working, I would either be reading a book or I would be, spending some time swimming, which is one of my hobbies. I do travel, but don't travel as much as my customers do. I try to do like 3 or 4 trips a year, but yeah, I think in the last 10 years, right, like the ability to actually spend more time at work without calling it work has improved a lot for me.
That's also the secret to success, when you're working without not thinking that it's work. We did speak about Swades here at a large extent, but apart from Swades, is there any other movie or book that has inspired you and have had a major impact?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to the Bhagavad Gita time and again for all the big questions that I have in life. It's something that, I think I've always kept by my side.
What is the best piece of advice that you've received and how has that shaped your life?
So, back in my previous job in Amadeus, right, my boss used to say, keep things simple, right? And I think sometimes in this ever complex world, right, when we try to build something or do something, we make our life exceedingly complex without the need for it. And I think this keep things simple is an advice that I still apply to every product we build, every decision we take, right? I think the simpler things usually do work out and the complex things sometimes fizzle out.
Absolutely agree. Considering how the travel industry, the sector is so hectic, how do you perhaps manage to balance between your professional and your personal life?
Well, to be honest, there's no such thing as work-life balance. I think if you are passionate about your work, you don't even feel that you're working. Of course, you need to take out time for your family, and I've been historically not that good, but at trying to improve every year at that. I think what keeps me sane is keeping Sundays sacrosanct and not really working on Sundays and spending most of the time with my kids and wife there.
If you could offer one piece of advice to the young entrepreneurs, what would that be?
So I think it's important to have a level of resilience where if you believe in your idea and your customers are liking what you do, I don't think you should give up because somebody else out there doesn't believe in it, right? And that somebody else could be, prospective investors, your current investors, some outsiders. I think we do get biased by what people say, right, in the outside world. But what's important for a business is, are you delivering value for your customers? And, is that something that's growing over time organically, right? If those two things are right, there is no reason to give up.
What are some common mistakes that you would suggest young entrepreneurs to avoid, especially scaling a tech startup based on your experience with Ixigo?
I think in the early days, focus is very important. So I'll give you an example. Like in our very early days, when we were trying to figure out what to build, we ended up building a lot of things in the first 5 years, right? Some of which, like when the app ecosystem came, we built 4 apps, right? Finally, we kept like a couple of them, but we shut down 2 of them, right? Basically, it's important to put your bets on one big thing that makes your company work, right? And that big thing in our case was just betting on the next billion users or the aspiring middle class of India and saying, can we build the best travel experience for them, right? As long as you have a core like that that works, you can figure out many other attachments to it later. But if you try to build 10 things out in your early days, right, it's very likely that you'll fail at all of them.
So you mean to say that you should just have plan A and you should not have any backup plan, because in that scenario, focus is only on the major plan?
Having said that, if it's not working out completely, the ability to pivot, the ability to not get over-wedded with that forever is also very important, because we live in an ever-changing world. So The cycles used to be 5-year, 7-year long where something new will come and disrupt you. Those cycles are shrinking. It could be just a matter of 2 or 3 years when the business model evolves or the product evolves so much that you've not caught up to it. So even though you're betting on the core thesis forever, but how you play that thesis needs to continue evolving with the market. Because many companies get over-wedded to how they're playing that thesis and do not look at what's around the corner too much. So in our case, we do these hackathons, time and again, where we come up with new ideas for evolving needs. And our Train app was born in such a hackathon, right? So today it's become the core of our business. But if you look at AI and what impact it's creating now, I think the cycles of disruption are about to get smaller.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Bajpai, for joining us on WION Business Masters and sharing your journey with us, which has that been of resilience and, of course, a very successful, enduring company in India today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I actually employ a lot of youngsters in my team. So I love to work with freshers. And given the fact they'll listen, they'll understand, they'll go back to my solutions, they'll come back with a solution, and they'll make it happen. So whatever they make it happen may not be necessarily your satisfaction. At the end of the day, it'll come closer to your what you are expecting. That's something I see youngsters are bringing on the table as one of the strengths. Not because they have bookish knowledge is good, but they also have the knowledge that actually impacts the world today.